When will load shedding end?
Well, how I answer that question is to say that we need about 6,000 megawatts, additional megawatts into the grid. So when the president unveiled the energy action plan, our computation was that we were short of 6,000 megawatts. So my efforts is to make sure that I add those additional megawatts onto the grid. And when we announce the winter outlook, essentially our projection on what will be the aggregate demand and the performance on the generation side, we could tell that because we're going into winter, the worst case scenario, and that worst case scenario was modeled on the following. First was that it projected that the demand will peak at about 34,000 megawatts, and that the rate at which the units are failing, what we call the unplanned capacity loss factor, they will take out about 18,000 megawatts. And then if we continued on the trajectory of the performance, when we entered the winter period, about 48-50% energy availability factor, that talks to the efficiency and the performance of the plants. Then if those three are present...
Forgive me, Minister,
yes.
but I do appreciate the numbers and the number of megawatts that we do need to bring on. But I think the question for me is one of timing, i.e., when do you think we will have the sufficient megawatts to end load shedding?
So I think it was important to make that projection. So let me illustrate to you. So when we started early in April, we're sitting at 48% energy availability factor. And now as I talk to you, are averaging about 60%. And just to bring it into numbers, 1 percentage point amounts to about 477 megawatts. So we have added, if you like, 12 percentage points to that. So you are talking something in the order of magnitude of about, let's say, 6,000 megawatts that has been added into the grid. And then going into the immediate future, we are anticipating that they will continue to see improvements on the energy availability factor, and we are anticipating to bring on stream about 3 units at Tutuka. Tutuka is one of our worst performing power stations, but what the head of generation has done at ESCOM, Mr. Begi Nxumalo, was to place one of the most seasoned and experienced general managers. Bruce is being placed at Tutuka, and the projection is that we are likely going to get another 3 units at Tutuka. Each unit packs about 560 megawatts. So you're talking something in the order of magnitude of 1,680 megawatts that should come on stream by the end of August. And then we're going into the Kusile. You know that there's 3 units that had failed there as a result of the compromised structural integrity of the chimney there as a result of the failure of the flue gas desulfurization unit, which is meant to remove the amount of sulfur content that we are emitting. So we had to remove those 3 units, and then we applied for a special dispensation to have alternative stacks so that we bypass that unit that has failed. So our projection is that we'll get another 2,400 megawatts.
Absolutely.
So when you put that together, you can see that we are getting back our megawatts.
No doubt. And I think South Africans can see a certain amount of progress. You certainly appear to be a very hardworking minister. But my question was, when? Do we have a date clear in our minds as to when load shedding will end? I'll tell you why I ask that, because many people connected to our energy policy, from ESCOM to ministries, have been asked this question: when will load shedding end? And there seems to be a concerted attempt to keep that vague, keep that ambiguous. So, for example, the chairperson of ESCOM couldn't give us a date. Is there a deliberate attempt not to set a date and keep South Africans guessing so that you then won't be held accountable for that date?
No, there's no deliberate attempt. So what I'm trying to illustrate is these megawatts that are coming on stream. And remember that it's also a function of demand. And one of the things that I can't guarantee now as I speak to you is the rate of failure of these units. And that's why you have a situation where you are able to move in a space of about 6 hours. ESCOM announces that we are stage 2, and then suddenly we are stage 3, we end up at stage 5. So one of the things that we are building into the performance of the grid is their reliability. And the best way of doing that is that once we create this buffer that I've referred to, because we do expect as we come out of winter that demand is going to taper down. And I've shared with you the additional megawatts that we are bringing on stream. So what we are going to do in that period, we are going to do what we call opportunity maintenance. So we know that there are units that are notorious for failure without announcing. We take those out because we have planned to fix them, and then we return them into the grid. So if you were to ask me, at the rate at which we anticipate the consumption when we go into summer, I think it peaks at about 28,000 megawatts. You will have sufficient amount of megawatts into the grid to meet that demand. And then you are likely going to have, most likely, going to have instances where we go day after day without any load shedding. But we have not resolved load shedding. That's the point I'm making. The best measure of our degree to end load shedding is when I have sufficient amount of megawatts that are reliable in the grid to meet our computation of what is peak demand. Winter, we are getting out of winter, but there's still a winter season that's coming. So if I have sufficient amount of megawatts to meet what we call peak demand, and our projection, the historic peak, is about 34,000 megawatts. And on that 34,000 megawatts, you make provision for the reserve margin. That's about 2,200 megawatts that is required at all times to be able to protect the grid. And then you must factor into that additional megawatts that will accommodate any failure that might arise. And that's why I'm not in a position to say by this date, but I'm able to say to you, by this date, you are going to get an additional about 5,800 megawatts.
And which date is that?
And that's the date, and that's the date, the 24th of December. And I can illustrate that to you. I did say that we are expecting these units, 3 units from Tutuka. They pack each 560 megawatts, so you get about 1,680
And are you
megawatts.
confident that we're on the road to that 5,800 megawatts by the 24th of December?
I'm more than confident. And